Money, threats, murder, and scandal. Just another day in the life of New York City's elite. But you just might be surprised to hear how similar some of the Catholic popes' lives were to our favorite teens. The Avignon Papacy had enough dirt going around to make Serena, Blair, and Jenny look like, well, good Catholic schoolgirls. Enemies were won and friends were lost because of the Avignon Papacy. That meant Europe would have to choose sides. In fact, it was an early origin of some of history's biggest drama, World War. Coming up on Gossip Girl, we'll see how the papacy played out with Avignon. It started with the huge effect of papal power over Europe, was felled by national identities, and regained through wise choices of friends, or, as others might call them, enemies.
Who's the Pope now? That's something I'll never tell. You know you love me. XOXO. Gossip Girl.
Good afternoon, Upper East Siders. After 200 texts and hours of stalking, I have a great surprise for you. Nothing juicy is in the works of our late hierarchy. But I'd hate to disappoint everyone, so I'll dish the gossip on another hierarchy, feudalism. In the Middle Ages, feudalism was for a long time the dominant form of society. The Roman Catholic Church modeled their flow of power and organization after this idea. At the top of the power chain sat the Pope, and at the bottom sat the communicant. The Church gained its power through decretals or forgeries, like the donation of Constantinople, which was an official-looking document stating that the Church owned Constantinople. Of course, a quaint papal estate here and there certainly helped the Church's influence. After all, us Manhattanites well know money is power. Pope Innocent III represented the epitome of papal power by holding significant influence over numerous kings and princes. He was in general highly respected and believed that he should be the intermediate between God and rulers. Likewise, all rulers should seek divine approval through the Pope. 78 years after Innocent III's death in 1216, Pope Boniface VIII assumed the papacy. In this time, Europe had undergone vast social change. Citizens held more faith in their national rulers and newborn legislations. The popes, however, were stuck in the old European mentality and continued ruling as Innocent had, banking on the idea that they could still directly control nations. Francis Philip the Fair and England's Edward I refused to submit to the old conservative hierarchy. They ignored pontificate mandates and began taxing the clergy to create more national revenue. Pope Boniface was outraged. He would now receive less cash flow from the French and English clergy. Boniface fired a warning shot, his papal bull, Clericos Laicos. It threatened to excommunicate any rulers who taxed the church without papal approval. As a result, Edward refused to provide protection to clergymen traveling to Rome. Almost none of them dared to trek to Rome now. Philip, on the other hand, planted a double whammy. Not only did he cease exportation of gold and silver, but he also completely cut off any finances to the papacy from France. Later on in his rule, Philip arrested a papal legate and the Bishop of Pamiers on charges of treason. Philip's action deviated from the tradition of the state never placing clergymen on trial. Pope Boniface once again issued a papal bull, this time with a more serious tone. The bull, Ausculta Fili, stated that the church was superior over the state. Not to anyone's surprise really though, Philip and Edward ignored it. Ah, there's nothing that melts a woman's heart quite like a bad boy, is there, ladies? As a last resort, Boniface issued the infamous papal bull Unum Sanctum, which translates to one sword. The figurative sword referred to the belief that the church is a united whole with all ruling power. But once a bad boy, always a bad boy. In an act of rebellion, France burned the papal bull. Boniface was infuriated and demanded all of France be prohibited from the Catholic Church until the nation sought to make amends. Adding more fuel to the fire, the French Estates General voted to strip the Pope of civil authorities. They claimed that the king would answer to no one but God himself. Sick and tired of the bickering, Philip kidnapped Pope Boniface. Luckily for the Pope, he still had some fans left in the town where he was being held captive. They liberated him 3 days after he arrived. Not so luckily for the Pope, however. His captors abused him terribly in those 3 days, and he died less than a month after his rescue. Seems like when it comes to wars, words can only get you so far. Pope Benedict XI assumed the role of Pope after Boniface died, but was poisoned within 9 months. The Catholic Church was at one of its most vulnerable states in history. The question on everyone's mind was, would it sink or swim? After seriously considering the Catholic Church's status, a friend of the French king was named Pope, Clement V. The Catholic Church hoped this move would re-establish good terms with the French. The only trouble was maybe the Church was playing too nicely. Amends began with the papal coronation being held in France, and eventually the entire papal court moved to the city of Avignon, a city that was then just outside the borders of France on papal territory. In Avignon, the papal court felt a great French influence and remained there for 70 years. This period of the court residing in Avignon was officially termed the Avignon Papacy. During the Avignon Papacy, there were 7 popes, all of whom were French. Needless to say, France had the upper hand in the Catholic Church for these 70 years. A couple of the popes lived outrageously luxurious lifestyles, shamelessly abusing church funds for their own gluttony. Back in Rome, the Catholic Church's absence had left a void. The city was becoming desolate. Romans wanted the papacy to return to its original home in order to restore the city. Unfortunately, Italy was in great political turmoil at this time, and this prevented any execution of the papacy's return. Pope Urban V had a chance to return to Rome in 1367 to the delight of Romans. However, he was forced to pack back up for France 3 years later in order to quell British-French drama. Finally, in 1377, Gregory XI succeeded Pope Urban V and returned the papacy to Rome, where he died. At this point, the majority of the cardinals were French. Since they determined who the next pope would be, they planned to vote for a French pope to yet again uproot the papacy to Avignon. The Romans became aware of the cardinals' intentions and made sure the cardinals were aware of their wishes as well. The Romans did not want to see the papal court abandon them once again, so they did what any other sane but unsatisfied citizen would do. They placed flammable materials beneath the cardinals' meeting room. They threatened to burn the cardinals unless the next pope was Roman. As they were setting up, the Romans shouted, "Give us a Roman or we will make your heads turn redder than your hats." So, via threats, Urban VI was named pope. Urban, being Italian, was rather bitter about the French domination in the church. He was controlling and paranoid, but he did have some good qualities. He rightfully made accusations of greed, immorality, and simony against many of the French church officers. Urban's vicious attacks on the French cardinals drove them back to Avignon, where they declared their own pope. The French claimed Urban was not validly elected because of the Romans' threats. Instead, they declared Clement VII to be pope. In a final act of the French's civil annihilation, Pope Urban VI gave all French cardinals positions to Italian clergymen. This divide in the Catholic Church is referred to as the Great Schism, and lasted 40 years. The Avignon Papacy caused the Great Schism, which resulted in Europe dividing into teams: nations that supported the French Pope and nations that supported the Roman Pope. Those that supported Rome were Poland, Hungary, Germany, England, most of Italy, and Scandinavia. Those that supported the French were France, Scotland, Spain, and southern Italy. Because of the Avignon Papacy, European tensions arose that later escalated into wars such as World War I and II. So, you see, juicy drama does not only exist in our privileged world, Upper East Siders. Sometimes we just need to look back where we came from for some legitimate entertainment. If you only take one thing from today's dish, know that there is hope for interesting things outside our own lives. Until the next scandalous scoop pops up, XOXO, Gossip Girl.